Within most developed countries, notions of pragmatism, notions of the fact that we have democracies, have succeeded in tempering the market economy. In the 19th century, 18th century, the Industrial Revolution had some very negative effects on people, particularly in working classes all over the world. We see data where life expectancy was reduced, heights were reduced. We can look at medical records and see that actually living standards in among large fractions of the population actually went down. But eventually we passed legislation about working conditions, and eventually we circumscribed some of the worst kinds of behavior. We eventually, in the 20th century, we put regulations that imposed better environmental conditions, and so some of the damage was reversed, and that we have made the market economy work in ways that the benefits of it are at least far more widely shared than they were 100 years ago.
Solar cells can provide remote areas with electricity during the day, but require batteries to store that energy for use at night. Raman's team has developed a potential solution, a simple thermoelectric device that generates power when it's exposed to the cold night sky. It's made possible by a phenomenon called radiative sky cooling. Raman reasoned that this temperature difference could be exploited to generate electricity. His team built their device using an aluminum disc that acts as a radiative cooler. Its cool side faces the night sky, while its other side is warmed by the air around it. As heat escapes upwards, a thermoelectric generator converts the temperature difference into electricity that powers a small LED light. For now, the energy output of the device is just a tiny fraction of what a solar cell can produce, but engineering improvements could eventually boost its performance. In addition to lighting, Raman says the device could be useful for specialized applications, such as powering wireless sensors and monitoring atmospheric conditions. Or it could be a really cool way to recharge your cell phone at night.
As jetliners carry passengers around the world, they also collect vital weather measurements, like air temperature and wind speed. During the pandemic, however, air travel has come almost to a halt. To create weather forecasts, meteorologists need to feed accurate information about current weather conditions into their models, and planes are one of the best ways to get such info, since they sample the atmosphere at different altitudes and locations. But with the coronavirus grounding flights around the world, meteorologists are feeling the loss. Forecast quality declined the most for long-range projections and over remote areas where planes are one of the few sources of data, In Greenland, for example, the accuracy of temperature forecasts has decreased by as much as 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Areas with heavy air traffic like the US and China were also affected because fewer flights means less data. Europe made out better thanks to its dense network of ground-based weather stations. Subpar forecasts may sound like little more than a headache. After all, weather is notoriously unpredictable, but it could be a big problem for many industries, like utilities, which have to estimate household heating and cooling needs in order to meet electricity demand. Farmers also rely heavily on forecasts to decide when to plant and harvest crops. That lower quality forecasts could make it harder to provide early warning for extreme weather events.
Journalism is the gathering, reporting, the dissemination of news and information in the public interest. Now, it used to be that we could always tell who a journalist was because there are traditional views about who is a journalist. And journalists have been identified as being people either who are working for a media organization, working in a job of a journalist, or someone who's been trained specifically and gone through a college education in journalism, so they've got some sort of qualification. Or journalists have been identified as people who are members of a professional association or a journalist union. And so these have been the ways in which we've been able to identify journalists in the past. That's not so easy these days. Today, thanks to the internet, we've got much more sort of participation in the work of journalism and in journalism itself. But it's important to say that although the broad spectrum of who is working in journalism, and it may involve people who do blogging and other things, although you might say the door is open to far more people being engaged in journalism, that does not dilute the importance of standards and quality in the work that's being done. Many more people today may not be journalists, but they do commit acts of journalism.
So first, let's talk just a little bit about how alcohol is metabolized. Some sources claim that alcohol is converted into sugar by the liver, and this is not true. Alcohol is converted to a number of intermediate substances, none of which is sugar, until it's eventually broken down into carbon dioxide and water. Because too much alcohol is quite harmful to your cells, this detoxification process is a pretty high priority for your body. That means that if your liver is busy dealing with alcohol, it will delay dealing with other nutrients, which is why drinking alcohol causes your blood sugar to go down and your blood fats to go up temporarily. It's also said that alcohol shuts down your body's fat-burning engine. This is technically true, but it's a little misleading. All it really means is that your body will use the byproducts of alcohol metabolism as fuel preferentially. Over the long haul, however, this doesn't have much impact on the amount of fat you burn or store. As always, the amount of stored fat on your body is primarily determined by whether you're taking in more calories than you're using. The source of the calories is really secondary. Unlike other nutrients, alcohol can be absorbed directly from your stomach into your bloodstream where it travels to your brain. This effect is accelerated when you drink on an empty stomach. Having food in your stomach slows down the speed at which alcohol enters your bloodstream.
Why are so many young people unhappy? To cite just one example, Reuters reported in 2019 that suicidal thinking, severe depression, and rates of self-injury among U.S. college students more than doubled over less than a decade. And unhappiness is hardly confined to Americans, as the social commentator Kay Heimowitz recently wrote, Germans are lonely, the bon vivant French are lonely, and even the Scandinavians are lonely. The British Prime Minister recently appointed a Minister of Loneliness. People have more money, better health, better housing, more education, and live longer than at any time in history. But people, especially the young, are unhappier than at any time since data began to be collected. Why? There are any number of reasons: increased drug and opioid addiction, less human interaction because of constant cell phone use, and young people's fears for their future are the most widely offered explanations. But the biggest reason is the loss of values and meaning.
What I'm trying to get people to understand is when they see a homeless person on the street or in a shelter or in an informal settlement, what they're seeing actually is the failure to implement the right to adequate housing by all levels of government. Rather than look at the individual and say, oh, that person landed there because of some personal characteristic or trait, what's really at play there is the failure of governments to actually implement their human rights obligations. So a homeless person has nowhere to live and therefore nowhere to sleep, but perhaps rough on the streets. A homeless person has nowhere to eat, and so they eat on the street. And that's becoming a criminalized act. And that criminalization is a form of discrimination against people who are homeless. We need to get better at regulating third-party actors and ensuring that third-party actors like landlords, like investors in real estate, don't engage in activities that actually produce homelessness. And I think we need to take a really good long look at the way in which we're dealing with land, property, and investment in cities in particular, and develop regulations to ensure that we're not having the result of gross inequality between those who have and those who have nothing.
What is human capital? Human capital is the knowledge, skills, and personality attributes that humans have that contribute to the creation of goods and services. Our creativity and habits are also part of human capital. Human capital refers to the production factors coming from human beings that we use to create products and services. In other words, human capital is the collection of all our resources. It comprises all our knowledge, abilities, talents, skills, intelligence, training, judgment, and experience. Human capital also includes our wisdom, individually and collectively. Quite simply, it refers to qualities that human beings have or learn that make them more productive. In a national economy, human capital refers to how its population contributes towards wealth creation. Human capital, alongside structural capital and relational capital, make up knowledge capital. Human capital also refers to the value of a person for a company, specifically their value regarding being productive during the time span of their career.
Sir Isaac Newton contributed several key principles to the studies of science and mathematics in the fields of optics, calculus, and mechanics. Among Newton's most renowned work is the theory of universal gravitation, or gravity, which holds that a universal force of attraction exists between all matter. Newton studied at Cambridge until the Plague of London forced the university to close in 1665. It was during that time, it is said, that an apple inspired him to study gravity. According to a popular story, the young scientist saw an apple fall from a tree and questioned why the apple or any object falls down to the ground rather than sideways or up into the air. Newton decided that matter must have a force that pulls other matter toward it. The larger the object, the greater the force. In this case, then, once the apple separates from the tree, the earth pulls it in what the human eye perceives as a downward or falling motion. Newton also theorized that the force that pulls falling objects to the ground is the same force that keeps the moon moving around the earth.
First off, let's have a look at a practice called earthing or grounding. Earthing is when you connect to the Earth's natural energy by walking barefoot on grass, sand, dirt, or rock. Earthing can diminish chronic pain, fatigue, or other ailments that plague so many people today. Apparently, when you walk barefoot or your skin comes into contact with the earth, free electrons are taken up into the body. These electrons are nature's strongest antioxidants and help to neutralize damaging free radicals that lead to inflammation and disease in the body. Already, that's a lot to take in, but let's look at what the ailments they claim to heal are. Diffuse the cause of inflammation. Reduce or eliminate chronic pain. Improve and promote deeper sleep. Lower stress and promote calm. The list goes on. Basically, it will help with everything from inflammation to menstrual symptoms and from jet lag to athletic recovery.
Toxic parenting can sneak into your family life before you realize it, especially in times of stress. There are so many things in life that are beyond a child's control. That's why kids depend on their parents or caregivers to keep them safe and secure, both physically and emotionally. Sadly, some parents struggle with damaging behavior known as toxic parenting, which can have long-lasting, damaging effects. Toxic means poisonous, harmful, contaminated. A toxic parent is someone whose negative, poisonous behavior causes harmful emotional damage, and that damage can contaminate a child's sense of self. As parents, we set the tone for our kids. When we're upbeat and positive, it has a ripple effect on the rest of the family. When we're discouraged and cynical, we make life really unpleasant. We might do this with negative comments, personal digs, or a hostile tone of voice or body language. No otherwise good parent wants to behave in a way that harms their child, but toxic interactions can slip into family life before you realize it, especially when you're stressed.
What's the literal definition of risk? Business schools use risk analysis, so what do you mean by risk? We need a dictionary. When you look at the dictionary, this is literal. The literal definition of risk, what it says is the definition, for example, the possibility of injury, a dangerous element or factor, chance of, degree or possibility of such loss, and so on. So risk has two parts. If you look at the literal definition of risk, one part is the consequence of some kind of particular danger or hazard loss, and the other is about the probability of it, chance and consequence, okay? And then at least where the English language is concerned, when you look up the words safe and safety, which you'll learn, it's a little bit of a loop, a little circular argument that's free from harm or risks, secure from danger, harm or loss, the condition of being safe, and so on for all. And what do we take out of it? At least when we talk about safe, at least in the English language, we are talking about something that is safe or it sounds safe.